Okay, I'm going to list this as the first video that we're going to cover kind of a wide range of topics. Prep 1 was around sketching, Prep 2 was around modeling, and Prep 3 is going to be just a mishmash. And you have to give yourself a little bit of grace on this one because some of the topics covered here, we haven't covered extensively, if at all. We did cover forms when we were talking about the castle, but that was more of a kind of one-off. It wasn't part of the formal curriculum. So this little section is not meant to be able to get you through a very in-depth discussion on forms, but it should be able to get you through what they're going to ask potentially as an assessment question, because again, this is only 35 to 40 questions, so there are only going to be 1 or 2 questions on forms. So let's jump into it and just, kind of work with the fact that we're not going to get into any great depth. So I already clicked form, and I shouldn't have. So on our Fusion 360 panel, around the create, we have all the typical stuff we use. We have the create sketches, we have the extrusions, revolutes, holes, rectangular patterns. Over here is this create a form. Now, you have to kind of get your mindset around what a form is. So here in the tool description, it says, creating a form enters form mode and inserts a form feature into the timeline. Use form tools to create and edit history-free bodies by pushing and pulling on vertices, edges, and faces, and this is commonly referred to as T-spline modeling. Thing to keep in mind is until we do some tools like Thicken, we're really working with like theoretical sheets of paper that we would build things from. So let's get into it. So if I click on form or create form, have some options. Under create, I have the list of things that you may have seen. I think one of the questions we had in prep was, what's the simplest way to create the box, create the thing that was shown? So for your submission, I just want you to create each of these guys. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a box. Now I can create that in my typical thing here. And let's go get it where it actually can show it. And I don't care about sizing. I just want you to create basically a box. Now, if I go back into my home view, what you're going to see is it created this little squat little guy here. Now, the options are changing length and changing width. So I can push and pull those. So I can make it taller. I can make it wider. In addition, for each of these faces, for length faces, I can change that. So right now we're talking 2. Now I'm talking 3, and I can increase that. When I go up, I can also have the ability to change that as well. So you have the ability to change the width face, the height face, all these things, and you can kind of balance it out. Now, what that allows you to do is you can then manipulate the let's call it the composition of the cube. And the way that is really defined is 3 things. The first is if you have just a panel, let me hit OK. So now I have my thing. Now I can click and select a panel. If I go into modify and edit the form, if I have that panel selected, I have the ability to change it. I can do everything. I can pull it up. I can push it back down in. I can change the angle of that particular face. So I have a lot of different options. On the menu, in like let's say transfer mode, I can either have it where I can choose anything. I can pick translations. I can pick rotations. I can pick scale. So I can either have it as all and have all of these things available or limit them down. And in addition, I can play with coordinate space. Okay, so all I suggest is you sort of play around and just get to know what these menu items are. Most likely, the question's going to be basic enough that we probably already covered it. Okay. All right, so that is the cube. Now, one of the questions we had is, what are the other options? So we're going to skip plane for a second. We're going to go to cylinder. If I select cylinder, I'm going to go ahead and pick the same face. I'm going to look at the top here, and I'm going to create it. So let's say I'm just going to make it exactly right beside that guy. Now, once I've hit once I've hit the diameter, I want to go back and look at home. Then I can play with it. I can change the height of this particular cylinder. I can change the number of faces that I have on it. So I can change the diameter of face, which is basically how many panels do I have going around. I can change the height faces, which is basically changing the number of panels that go from the bottom to the top. So that creates my cylinder. Hit OK. So I've created a cylinder, created a box. Let's go ahead and create a sphere. And a sphere is going to be exactly what you expect it to be. So we're going to go up here, go to the top. I'm going to go ahead and draw my sphere. If I go ahead and put it back into home mode, then I can change things like the diameter. I can make it bigger, and that's going to be basically the same things we talked about. Longitudinal, I can change latitude, I can change the number of faces. So I've got my box, I've got my cylinder, I've got my sphere. So for your submission, I want you to create all three of these. Now, in addition, I have the torus, which is going to be basically a donut. So if I look from the top, I can draw that guy out too. Hit OK, because I can have the same number of changes. So I go back to this home view. I can change everything. I can make it thicker. I can make it wider. Have some options there. Same thing. I can change the number of faces. For each of these, I can always modify. I can always modify and edit a form, and then I can change each of these different faces. In that case, I picked a panel. I can also pick a edge, and I can also pick vertices, which are basically the point in between. In addition, I can also choose multiple panels, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it will pick, or basically it will treat all those as the one selection, and then you would be able to do the same things that we talked about before. So on create, we've now created 4 different shapes. The quad ball is going to be a T-spline quad ball, which is, let's see here, select a plane center point for the sphere, use manipulator's input fields to specify the diameter and the number of faces. In a sphere, select a plane that's a center point for the sphere. So in a sphere, you have a plane as a center point. In a quad ball, you have a center point. So I guess the difference between those two is simply what's the center, what's the radius. Lastly, you have pipe, and I'm not going to create these, but you can manage the creation of complex topologies based on selected curves, and cast can be sketch geometry and edges of body. So what I want you for submission is just to have created these 4. And I think the last one that we hadn't talked about, actually no, we're all good. Okay, so that's kind of in the creation space. Now let's talk a little bit about, let's go here, hold on 1 second, editing a form. So now we have all these created. Now I can go in here and I can edit those. So let's zoom in and just choose this box. So same thing, I can say modify, boop. I can say modify, edit form, and then I have the ability to choose 3 things. Remember, I have the edge, and I can also select multiple edges. In addition, I can double click on an edge and it will do a selection that goes around the entire distance. In the same way, if I take a panel, let's see here, what happens nope, same thing. If I click this panel, it's going to go that way. Let's see here, I have a theory that if I click this guy going around, nope, same deal. I swear I was playing around with this. When I clicked one, it selected all the way around it, but I guess I was wrong. Okay, last thing, you can pick individual points. So I can pick a point, and then I can treat that as the manipulation point. So in this case, I'm choosing a point that I'm manipulating. In this case, I'm picking a panel. You're seeing the whole thing moved there. In addition, if you want to pick multiple, I think it's shift. Yep, it's shift. If you hit shift, you can then modify all these as one item, kind of like so. Okay, so we have the creation, we have manipulation. Now the last bit. Now theoretically, these are all, for the most part, paper. They don't have weight to them. They don't have mass to them. So if I do something like inspect and I look for a cross-sectional analysis, and let's say I go through here. If I'm going through here, you're not really seeing anything. It's just, it's just cutting into it. It's empty. It's basically a thin sheet of paper. and it's basically the shape of that particular form. So let's say I hit OK, and then let's just say from analysis perspective, I want to take that and turn that off. The one thing I can do is I can do this other technique called thicken. Once I thicken it, then I can treat it like a body and I can start doing other methodologies. Okay, a little bit of a jump edit there. We're going to go ahead and click on that thicken. I'm going to pick the form, this particular one here, the cylinder, and I want to make it thicker. So I'm going to choose a thickness that I want associated with it. And then I can choose soft, or I can choose, I think, sharp. I'm just going to choose soft and hit OK. Now I'm still in the edit form kind of space. So once I hit finish form, now when I come through here and turn back on my sectional analysis, so turn this guy back on, now all of a sudden now I can see the fact that I do have thickness associated with it. So in this case for the cylinder, you can see the purple cross-sectional area. Now I misspoke earlier and it's fine. In this case, when we're talking about a box, it is going to be filled. So these objects are going to be filled, but when we're talking about a form like a plane or a cylinder, thicken's required in order to get the same effect. An enclosed space will give you like a solid body. Okay. So I think that wraps it up from create a form, edit a form, and then thicken a form. So for your submission, like you have these 4 items created, I'd like you to have thickened the cylinder and then show a, let's go from an inspection standpoint, let's show a cross-sectional analysis. So let's show, inspect sectional analysis. So have it turned on and active so that we can see that. And that will be the submission for part 1.